Solving quadratic equations. We're going to solve the same problem three different ways. This should say 3x squared minus 2x minus 5 equals 0. So the first one we're going to do is factoring. Now there's multiple ways you can go about factoring. I'm going to show you two. A common one is to say, some people use it as, they'll call this a diamond, but they'll say, what two numbers multiply, well, 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. We're going to put the product of those two on the top, and then we'll put this number on the bottom, so that's negative 2. Now we'll say, what two numbers multiply to give us negative 15 and add to give us negative 2. So it's multiplication to get the top, addition to get the bottom, and that would be negative 5 and 3. In this particular problem, it's pretty straightforward. So we would take 3x squared, we leave it alone, we take the negative 2x, and that's broken up into negative 5x plus 3x. Or we can say it as, I'll just write it like that, it doesn't matter, plus 3x minus 5 equals 0. Now we're going to factor by grouping. We're going to group the first two together and we'll group the second two together. So what can we factor out of this first one? The greatest common factor would be x. So we can take that out and we have 3x minus 5 left plus 3x minus 5. I'm going to put that in parentheses so we can see that clearly. Note here we have a 3x minus 5 and a 3x minus 5. If these two inside the parentheses aren't the exact same, we can't continue. So that right now is our greatest common factor, just like x was above. So I'm going to take out a 3x minus 5. 3x minus 5 times what will give me this first term? Well, the only thing that's left is our x. We'll write down our plus. 3x minus 5 times what will give me the second one? Well, the coefficient there would be 1. Now we'll set these, each factor equal to the 0. It's a 0 product property. So we get x equals negative 1. And over here, 3x equals 5, or x equals 5/3. Now, one thing that you can look at, if you ever notice that 3, this first coefficient and the last one add up to give you the middle one, that means they're going to be in the same parentheses. So if I was going to factor this straight, I could do something like, for 3x squared, we're going to have a 3x in it, and then 3x times x. So the only way to get this 5 is the 1 and 5, but that 5 has to be in the same parentheses as the 3x. And then when we add them together, it's going to give us a negative 2, so the 5 is negative, and this will be positive. So that's another way, if you see that. This is a general idea, and it works, and it's good. B, completing the square. So I'll rewrite it. We have 3x squared minus 2x minus 5 equals 0. When we complete the square, our goal is to make it a perfect square. So let's move this 5 to the other side. So we'll have 3x squared minus 2x equals 5. And then in order to do this, we want to make the coefficient of x squared equal to 1. So let's divide everything by 3. Equals 5/3. Now our goal is to get a perfect square here. Let's do a little review. If I have x plus a quantity squared, this equals x squared plus 2ax plus a squared. So what we want to do is we want to create this x squared plus 2ax plus a squared, and then we can write it as x plus a quantity squared. Now that a could be a negative, so it could say x minus a number. When we're looking here, we have the x squared, just like the x squared here. We have minus 2/3 x. We have this plus 2ax. They both have the a in there. So what that's saying is negative 2/3 equals the 2a. Or in other words, a is 1/2 of negative 2/3, which would end up simplifying to negative 1/3. If a equals negative 1/3, then a squared is 1/9. So what we're going to do now is write x squared minus 2/3 x. We're going to add in 1/9, but we can't just do it to one side of the equation. We need to do it to both sides because it is an equation and we have to keep them equal. So we've added in 1/9 to each side. Now we can factor this left side, and we know it factors to x plus a squared. So this is going to be x minus 1/3 quantity squared equals, and we can combine these together. We had multiplied by 3 over 3. So we would have 15 plus 1, which would be 16, all over 9. Now how do we solve this? We have a squared here. We're going to take the square root of both sides. And we can put our plus or minus down. So we have x minus 1/3 equals plus or minus 4 over 3. We have to make sure we always remember when we are taking the square root, we're going to put that plus or minus down. So we get x equals 1/3 plus or minus 4/3. And that will be 1/3 plus 4/3. 1/3 minus 4/3, which would be 5/3, and negative 3 over 3, which would be negative 1. And we get the exact same answer as we got before, which is good. We'd better get that same answer. And then let's do the last one, and I'll put it over here. See the quadratic formula? This is something that you have to know. If you have something of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, then the quadratic formula says x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. A good idea would be to memorize that. If you don't have it memorized, there's some songs that you can sing. You can sing it to the tune of Jingle Bells. And there's another one I've heard, but I forget what that one is because I use Jingle Bells. So in this particular problem, when we say 3x squared minus 2x minus 5 equals 0, a is 3, b is negative 2, and c is negative 5. So now let's plug it in. And one thing I'm a stickler on is I always want to see what your variable is, your variable equals. So we have negative of negative 2. That'll make it, so it's the opposite of negative 2. That'll make it positive 2. Plus or minus square root of negative 2 squared. If we're writing this as negative 2 squared, we have to put parentheses around that negative 2. Minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is negative 5. And let me extend that out a little bit. All divided by 2 times a. Now it's just a matter of simplifying it. So we have 2 plus or minus square root of 4. This will be 20 times 3 would be 60. It'd be a positive all over 6. 2 plus or minus square root of 64 over 6. 2 plus or minus 8 over 6. So we get 2 plus 8 over 6. Or 2 minus 8 over 6. 10 over 6 reduces to 5/3. And negative 6 over 6 reduces to negative 1. So there we have it. One problem done 3 different ways. And we need to know all 3 ways. We better make sure we get the same answer when we're doing that as well.